once described as, and I quote, a professional lesbian, Mercedes de Acosta was the most famous lesbian back in the first half of the 20th century. Hi, I'm Annie, and it is August, and it is the first week of GarbAugust. And the first week, the prompt for the first week is anything goes, so I decided to read some pulp non-fiction. Well, I was thinking I would get some juicy, gossipy details, as Mercedes de Acosta is mainly known for having affairs with famous women, and most of them film stars, being the most famous being Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich. Hi, I'm Annie, by the way, and I read this biography of Mercedes de Acosta, That Furious Lesbian, the story of Mercedes de Acosta by Robert E. Schanke. And this is a better read. I found this to be a less pulpy non-fiction biography than I had expected. And I expected this to be a gossipy biography because Mercedes de Acosta, she was a poet, a novelist, and a playwright, and her talents were never materialized. So I was thinking I was getting a gossipy book about her affairs with all of these famous actresses back in the day, as I am also a great admirer of Greta Garbo and Marlene Dietrich, and she had affairs with both of them. This happens to be a very well researched biography. And why could Schanke do this research? Because all of the letters that Mercedes received, love letters and all of kinds of documents and poems and plays, and she wrote also a novel, but all of her correspondence she not donated, but she sold to a museum when she was strapped for cash later in life. She also wrote a biography, I think it was back in the 1960s, which was really got a lot of publicity. Schanke did also a lot of research for this book. For example, there are details in it about what a Vanderbilt party had cost. Like, I understand why he did it, but in so much detail, but it shows the wealth of the family of the Acosta family. So, yeah, I can see this is relevant for this novel. It is an interesting fact to know, and there are more facts in it like that. It's a pity that not a lot of Mercedes letters that she sent have survived, because now Schanke had to fill out the book with quotations, and I didn't mind that as much as the fact that he also put in whole poems, which I thought was totally unnecessary, and it was for me an unwelcome interruption of the biography anyway. And what I also feel is that these poems, well, poems are about feelings. And I find these poems, it's understandable, but they are very heavily focused on her inner struggles. This gives a good insight in the Mercedes da Costa's personality, but whole poems. I rather have a section of a poem quoted and commentary written by Schanke on these poems, but that was not the case. So I found that a little bit of a page filling thing. Schanke doesn't look at Mercedes da Acosta through rose-colored glasses. He doesn't spare her, because she comes across in this biography as a depressive, self-centered and obsessive woman. She may have been all that, but I would have liked to have seen these things in light of the times in which she lived. And I would have liked to see more of how depression, what it was like to be depressive in an age where this wasn't widely acknowledged as a disease, and well, there was treatment, but Schanke doesn't write if Mercedes had treatment. I would have liked to know. Maybe he didn't know, but I just would have liked to know more about what it was like back then, and more about mental health through the eyes of the times. Anyway, I also would have liked to seen more what it was like to be an openly lesbian in the first half of the 20th century, because that was unusual. Most of the gay and lesbian women were closeted, and Schanke doesn't really go into this in this biography. He does mention this briefly, very briefly, when Mercedes wrote her autobiography. And although she didn't really out the women she had relationships with, only the mentioning of these women cast suspicion on these women. As well, Mercedes was openly lesbian, and everybody she mentioned, they thought, ooh. So her autobiography was absolutely sensational back in, I think she wrote it in the 1960s or something. So I would have liked to seen more of what the LGBTQ plus community was like back in those days. Going back to her autobiography, Here Lies the Heart. You can still read this. You can still get this autobiography. I haven't read it, but I'm really interested in it. A lot of women, Greta Garbo was among these women, were not happy they were mentioned in this autobiography, but other women like Marlene Dietrich, she supported Mercedes through thick and thin, even when her relationship was finished, and when Mercedes was down on her luck, her health and her bank account were failing, and she had to sell her private correspondence. She did make I don't know what it's called, but she made the arrangement that every letters and whatever she sold to the museum would be locked up until the death of the people who wrote them. So, and I think even in the case of Greta Garbo, that it was 10 years after Greta Garbo died that these letters would have been made public. But Greta Garbo, what I've heard, wasn't happy with that either, and they fell out anyway. But Marlene Dietrich and some other women and men she was friends with, they supported her even when she was down on her luck. But this autobiography, it has some inaccuracies in it. Schanke writes, as he did more thorough research in the facts of this autobiography, because Mercedes did see some points in her life through rose-colored glasses. For example, she states in her autobiography that her father had a narrow escape from a firing squad in Cuba. So he was imprisoned there. Well, the fact was that he indeed was imprisoned there, but Mercedes says he jumped over the prison wall, jumped off of the cliffs into the sea, and swam to America, and was picked up by an American vessel, an American ship. And this was not the case. Yes, he did escape. Now, well, did he escape? But Schanke states that it was physically impossible to, even if he jumped over the fence, over the prison walls, it is impossible to dive into the sea without crushing on the spiky rocks. So he couldn't have done it. And he even states that before they had firing squads, prisoners were thrown over the prison wall onto the spiky rocks to be spiked and to die on the rocks and be eaten by birds and vultures and that kind of thing. Well, it's too gruesome for words. So that is absolutely not true. What is most probable that happened is that he was indeed imprisoned, but that he gave evidence against some of his friends and was released in return, and he fled Cuba after that. And the main reason is why Schanke suspects this turn of events is that later in life he had his Mercedes' father stated he committed suicide, and he stated in his farewell letters, and he had worried about this for years and years before he committed suicide, that he thought he didn't deserve to live because his friends didn't survive, and he did. He didn't state that he gave evidence against them whilst he was in prison, but that's something that highly probable that happened. And there are other things in Mercedes' autobiography that are factually incorrect. But still, I think if you have read it, That Furious Lesbian is a very good supplement for this autobiography. As well, all the files are open now on all of the letters Mercedes received that were sold to the museum. So there is really a treasure trove of information. Would I recommend this biography? Yes. Don't expect to get a really excellently written biography, but I found the information valuable and interesting enough. I do hope, however, that somebody picks up where Schanke left off, room for further exploration. I mentioned the LGBTQ plus community back in the first half of the 20th century and mental health issues and that sort of thing. So yeah, I if you are interested in that and you are a writer, please write a book. All of the archives are open now, as everybody mentioned in this biography is long gone and have long died. So that would have been interesting. And are you reading for GarbAugust? What are you reading for GarbAugust? Are you reading any trashy non-fiction? I know this isn't a prompt anymore for GarbAugust, but this first week it is anything goes. So do pick up some trash. You can also read just one fiction pulp novel or one fiction pulp short story if you want. You don't have to do all of the prompts and all of the stuff that we as hosts and co-hosts do. But meanwhile, keep those pulp juices flowing, and I hope to see you in the next video.